Hello, it's Tuesday, it's 10 a.m. I got distracted. Is anyone here? Did you all leave because I didn't start on time? There was no fancy song or countdown. It's Tuesday, it's 10 a.m. I actually started before 10 o'clock or 10:01 turned to 10:01. So, good morning, friends. Good to see you. You can see me, but I can't see you. Do I need to keep saying that? I don't know. Good morning, Allison. Just a reminder, if you've got questions, throw them in the chat, and I will endeavor to answer them at the end. A little Q&A. Maybe we'll do a Q&A session. Grill the pastor one week. I don't know if I like that idea. Ask me anything. I don't know. Anyhow, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. And if I have an answer, I'll give it to you. If I don't, I'll try to look one up. And maybe I'll just say, So next week, no coffee and conversations. Coffee and convos. Next week, I'm going to be out of the office on Tuesday. So, yeah. Be praying for the missions team. They are on their way home. They have, as far as I last heard, they had made it to Turkey. And then they would be going from Istanbul to Seattle. Sometimes plane flying is weird. They go away from us to come to us. One time I saw a package that I was getting delivered. It stopped in Seattle. I think it stopped in Seattle. No, it just flew over us. It flew from like Shanghai, China to Knoxville, Tennessee, and then flew back from Knoxville, Tennessee to us for me to get it. It's like, well, just put it on a parachute and drop it out the airplane. It was my MacBook Pro, so I'm glad they didn't do that. All right. And then lastly, we are in Acts chapter 20, verses 1-6. We read verse 1 last week, but let's read 1-6 again, or read 1 again, and then we will see what it says. So after the uproar ceased, if you remember, there was a big riot that started, or not a riot, but could have been a riot, started to occur over Paul because he's preaching the gospel and people are getting saved, and they are no longer funneling money into the idol makers guild, the metal workers guild. And so they just, they're upset about it. And so they are going to get rid of Paul and they're going to take control. And so there's a big riot, and the disciples actually won't let Paul go speak on his own behalf. And the town clerk, the city, town clerk, I actually said the right word. The guy, kind of the liaison between the proconsul, like the governor level, and the city. So maybe like a mayor might be an appropriate equivalent. But he's like, hey, guys, we got to stop this. And so it ceases, and the uproar ceases. And Paul sent for the disciples, and after encouraging them, he said farewell and departed for Macedonia. And so Paul is on his way. He's heading towards like Philippi. Berea. So he's headed for part of Greece, and he's going to, when you think of that, Philip of Macedonia, Alexander the Great's dad. So it's a part of Greece. And so he's headed there, and he's going back to places he started churches. And when he had gone through the regions and had given them much encouragement, he came to Greece, which would be another word for Achaia, Corinth. Paul is showing up in Corinth. And what's interesting is, again, we see this pattern of Paul is he starts churches, and then he seeks to circle back by them and encourage them. The gospel, the way Jesus's methodology, which the apostles employed, was one of you teaching others what you know, and you encourage them in their faith. And so Paul is not just content to do it on his own. he is going to equip other people so that he can leave and move on, and then they will pass it on. So when you think of the Great Commission, Jesus says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age." When Jesus preaches the gospel and people get saved, when people started to follow him, it was a weird way to say it because we don't often think of it in those terms. We think of Apostle Paul doing that. But Jesus, his methodology was, I'm going to teach these 12 men, and others are going to listen and hear, and then they're going to go and teach others, and those others are going to teach others, and those others are going to teach others. And so it's multiplication, not addition. So when we preach the gospel, when we see people saved, we want them to come to know the Lord, and then them tell other people about Jesus, and then have them tell other people about Jesus. He wants to pass it on because his ministry will be more effective if there's a functioning, healthy church. It will work better if he can move on and start a new church. And then he wants to make sure that that previous church he started is doing well. So he shows up in Greece, and if you remember, he kind of has a troubled relationship with the church in Corinth. He writes them a first letter, and he tells them to knock it off. And he knows that their relationship is somewhat hindered because they've believed other people, and they've started to kind of question if they should listen to Paul. And Paul's like, "What is wrong with you people?" And he writes that letter, and it has a positive result. So that way they are restored to him. And Titus, I believe it was Titus, gives Paul indication that the Corinthians are restored to him. And so he writes 2 Corinthians. And he spent time with them there. His relationship was restored. And when a plot was made against him by the Jews, as he was about to set sail for Syria, he decided to return through Macedonia. So he makes this this networked relation path, and he heads back. And so it says that Sopater, the Berean, son of Pyrrhus, accompanied him, and of the Thessalonians, Aristarchus and Secundus, and Gaius of Derbe, and Timothy, and the Asians, Tychicus and Trophimus. These went on ahead and were waiting for us in Troas. So they are waiting for Paul and Luke, and whoever else was in the missionary band with Paul at that point. And they said, but we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, which would be Easter, after the Passover time frame, so early spring, when the weather was advantageous to actually sailing in the Mediterranean. And in 5 days, we came to them at Troas, and we stayed there for 7 days. So they go from Philippi to Troas, and they reunite with their band of brothers for their missionary endeavors. And Paul is going to make his way to Jerusalem. In this time frame, he actually writes the book of Romans. There's a ton of stuff that's going on connected that we would know about, that are affiliated, that we see that is accompanying Paul. So like when Paul is in Ephesus, he writes 1 Corinthians. Then he leaves and he goes to Macedonia. He's probably in Philippi or Berea, and he gets word that the Corinthian church is restored to him. So he writes 2 Corinthians, and then he goes and visits them. Then while he's in Corinth, in Greece, he writes the book of Romans to tell them, I want to go to Spain, but first I'm going to go to Jerusalem. And we're told that while he's writing them in 2 Corinthians, that he wants them to collect the money, and that when he comes to visit them, so in this time frame, he's going to go visit them, and they're going to take the money that they've collected, and send that to Jerusalem with officials from the Corinthian church, so that everyone can be assured that the Apostle Paul is using the funds for what they say they're going to be used for and treats it appropriately. Checks and balances are a good thing when it comes to finances. Dealing with money appropriately is a good thing. And so the Apostle Paul does these things. And so he takes that collection and he'll eventually take it to Jerusalem for the church in Jerusalem. And he's making his way there. And so there's all this stuff going on, these connections that are happening in the New Testament. Paul writes to the Romans. He's never been there. It's like a missionary support letter. It's telling them his understanding of the gospel and how to live out the gospel and what God has done in such a way that they can help him get to Spain, because they, as Christians, will want people in Spain to know about Jesus. It's fascinating. It's awesome. So what can we take from this? Well, we need to be witnessing to people and sharing the gospel with them. But then we also, once they come to faith, once they put their faith, hope, and trust in Jesus, we want to encourage them. We want to build them up and encourage them to faithfully live out the gospel, to faithfully live out their newfound relationship with Christ. And so to be disciples, Paul is encouraging them to this task. And so we don't want orphan Christians. We gotta tell people about Jesus and then encourage them in their faith. And we want to, when we send out missionaries, when we have people who go do missions work, we want to see people whose efforts are to start new churches and build up churches. There's that twin aspect. It's not just starting new churches and then leaving them on their own. No. Like, if that's your missions methodology, you don't understand the Apostle Paul. You don't understand this guy. If your missions methodology does not involve encouraging and strengthening existing churches that are on their own or that you've started, then you've probably overlooked the Apostle Paul's strategy. It's both. It's start new churches and equip and encourage the ones that have been started. You go out to come back. You go out to come back. And that's the way our faith works too. Like, when we gather on Sunday morning, it's both for encouragement and equipping to go out. And so, friends, here would be my encouragement to you. Who can you encourage in the faith this week, in that they might walk faithfully before the Lord? Who can you reach out to this week to encourage and say, hey, keep pressing on, keep working harder, keep pressing into the Lord, pursue him wholeheartedly, don't give up, fight hard, whatever you want, whatever terminology you want to use, whoever it is, like, who can you encourage this week to faithfully walk before the Lord? So I'll leave you with that. There are no questions in the chat, if it's working, assuming. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Be praying for the missions team as they're coming home. They get back today. And just a reminder, no coffee and conversations next week. All right. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you on Sunday.